Got a good handle on worldwide Marvel lore. Got a handle on the lore. Got a handle on the lore. I rectified a few mistakes and got a good handle on worldwide Marvel lore. Yeah, thank you. Welcome to CC Writes. My name is CC Lefke, and today I'm heading over to England. I'm buggering on over to England, chaps. I'm researching England, chaps. Yeah, chaps. Last week, I finished up my Marvel timeline, rectified a few mistakes, and got a good handle on worldwide Marvel lore. This week, I'm taking a look at the culture and history of England and gathering a few reference pictures for the setting of my Spider-Woman movie. In film, directors usually have other people who can do this for them, but I'm poor, so we're going to use the internet. Now, a lot of the stories I read growing up were actually based in the UK, but because I mostly read fantasy, I don't know much about England or its history or culture other than what I learned in history class or through Doctor Who. And I'm pretty sure Big Ben hasn't been blown up about 30 billion times, so I've got a little bit of learning to do. But I wouldn't be a writer if I didn't love me some research. So then, let's get started. High five. You tried, how cute. Wikipedia. 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 I like Wikipedia because you can use it as a base to jump off and look more deeply into a specific topic. What I like to do is just get my basic information from Wikipedia, and then I can check against its sources, and I can just use it if I have absolutely no knowledge over a topic. I can use it to get a good idea of what I need to look into and then dig more deeply into the specific things that are more relevant to what I'm interested in. I'm not sure if these numbers that it's giving me is correct, because it's saying that the London average income is $52,000 per year and the cost of living is $70,000 per year. So if that's true, then nobody would be able to live in London at all. I have heard that the cost of living in London is really high and people struggle a lot there, but that just seems really high to me. And I do see that the poverty rate in England, according to the information that I was able to find, is about 20%, which is a fairly high poverty rate. For reference, so I live in Indiana, and one of the counties in Indiana, Madison County, is a very high poverty area for Indiana, and the major city there, Anderson, Indiana, it actually has a poverty rate of about 20%. We could compare that to, let's say, one of the more well-to-do areas, Hamilton County, which is nearby Madison County, and the poverty rate for that area is 4.98%. I work at a nonprofit that serves people who live in poverty, and seeing that number to me is just outrageous. I can't even imagine all of England having that sort of poverty rate. That's just wow. I hope my numbers are wrong. I hope I'm just looking at really bad sources of information here. Okay, it looks like I'm not wrong. The poverty rate in England is around 22%. I wonder what it is for the whole US. Yeah, so in the whole US, our poverty rate is about 11.8%. Yeah, that's a huge difference between the countries, and that definitely changes the landscape of what I would expect to see, or what I would expect Spider-Woman to see on a day-to-day basis, because with an increase of poverty, there comes an increase in a lot of other disparities between people. It might look a little different in England than the US, because in the US we have a different healthcare system that doesn't treat everybody equally, unfortunately. We have very high healthcare costs, and so people who live in poverty are less likely to access healthcare in the United States. I'm curious to see what poverty in the UK looks like compared to the US, because in the US, to me, what that says is there's a decrease in access to healthcare, lack of access to transportation, there's higher levels of mental health concerns among people who are poor, there are higher rates of obesity because there's a lack of access to healthy food sources. A lot lot of times in high poverty areas, you'll notice that there's like a food desert around there. And what a food desert means is that within half a mile, you don't have access to a grocery store. So you don't have access to meat, milk, eggs, things like that. And there's also less access to fresh produce and healthy choices. And so people more often have to go to unhealthy choices for their eating habits. And that can cause a lot of problems. So because a lot of that is actually linked to health and healthcare in the United States, I don't know that it would look the same in England. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so we have an article here from The Guardian. It says that there are 2.3 million children who are affected by poverty. And that's deep poverty. It's so you have different levels of poverty where you live below the standard poverty line. You probably have to make a few difficult choices. If you have one bad month or one bad week, then it could make the difference between you having a house and being able to cover all of your bills and not being able to do that. In the United States, we actually call that ALICE, asset limited, income constrained, employed. Whereas deep poverty is you probably don't have access to proper housing, a sustainable food source or anything like that. It would be a lot more difficult to live in that situation. When I was growing up, we lived in deep poverty. My mom made about $5,000 a year, and a lot of times we didn't have enough money for food, and so we would have to go to food banks, or we would have to rely on friends to provide us money or shelter. It's not a very stable or easy environment to live in. And so this is why I got into nonprofits as well. So I work as a grant writer during the day, and as a grant writer, I have the ability to fund programs that help give people access to food, to give them access to healthcare, to create programs that can help people build their lives and set up structures around themselves to get themselves out of poverty. We do employment and housing and all sorts of things, and I really love it. It's really meaningful work, and I'm so proud of the work that I'm able to do through that. I get too excited talking about my job. So what I'm looking for is actually more of the human piece of poverty in the UK. Okay, so I found this YouTube video about child poverty. So this should give me a pretty good idea of what I'm looking for.
We asked 4 children to show us what life is really like growing up in Britain today below the poverty line.
That looks just like the fridge at my house when I was a kid.
Shopping. There. Shopping there. Shopping there. Shopping there. Shopping there. Shopping there. Hello. Hello. The electric is put on a key, which goes into a box, and Dad puts a fiver on it every so often. And when we run out of electric, the whole house goes.
That's a little different from the way I experienced it as a kid, because we would pay on a monthly basis. And there were times when our utilities would get cut off because we weren't able to pay for a couple of months. I remember one time my mom was late on rent, and the landlord actually cut off the water to our house. And so we would have jugs of water that we would be able to brush our teeth or shower with. This is turning into a sad story. I'm sorry.
Why are you reading books when you should be getting changed, mate?
I've got changed.
So why isn't KD changed then?
I've been trying to tell him.
I expect you to have a little bit of care of your 6-year-old brother, mate.
Okay.
And I don't expect you just to sit there and watch him hurt himself, mate.
Okay.
What?
Okay.
That's it, you're done.
I was the youngest, and so I didn't have as much responsibility to take care of younger siblings, but I do remember having to wake my mom up in the morning to go to work and wake my brother and sister up to go to school and things like that. We all had responsibilities that we had to take care of, and you end up growing up really fast in that kind of environment. All right, so I think that gives me a pretty good idea of what poverty looks like in the UK. It's very similar to what it's like in the United States, especially from the perspective of a child. There are a few minor differences, and that's in how services are provided to people. So tribal culture during the Iron Age, as well as Celtic culture. There were about 20 tribes in the area. Julius Caesar attempted to invade. Emperor Claudius managed to conquer Britain during 43 AD, and it was incorporated into the Roman Empire. They had a few uprisings, including by a queen. So then there was Greco-Roman culture prevailing within the area. So it introduced Roman law, Roman architecture, aqueducts, sewers, agricultural items, silk. Around the 4th century, they sent in missionaries. There was some butting of heads over ceremonies from the local people that bothered the Christians. Middle Ages. So 927, they were unified. All of the different tribes and kingdoms were unified in England. But then a wave of Scandinavian attacks ended with the conquest of the UK, but then the royal native dynasty came back with Edward the Confessor. Conquest by the Normans led to a new French-speaking aristocracy. And this is actually, I remember something about this in the development linguistically of English as a language, because there are so many words that we have that are French in nature or German in nature or, any other language. And it's because so many cultures ended up commingling in England, and depending on who was ruling at the time or what people learned to say as they were growing up, and as new things were created, they ended up taking different words from different languages to sort of create everything that we speak. And so English really is just kind of like a mishmash of a whole bunch of different languages. Signing of the Magna Carta, Catholicism flourished, 100 Years' War, Black Death in 1348, killed up to half the people in the country. That's crazy. From 1453 to 1487, civil war occurred between two branches of the royal family, the Yorkists and the Lancastrians. Okay, so this is the Wars of the Roses. I've heard of the Wars of the Roses before, but I didn't really know what it is because we don't learn this sort of thing in the US during our history classes, so I know nothing about it. So the Yorkists lost the throne to Welsh noble family Tudors, and King Richard III was killed. Is this the same King Richard from Robin Hood? Maybe? All right, early modern. So the Renaissance reached England through Italian courtiers, artistic, educational, and scholarly debate. Wonderful, wonderful things. They developed naval skills, and of course I know about the English Navy because that's something we learned about. Henry VIII declared himself head of the church, and then Mary and Elizabeth. Okay, I know a little bit more about this history. East India Company. Spain tried to re-establish Catholicism. 1666, the Great Fire of London. It was gutted but then rebuilt, and many of the buildings were designed by Sir Christopher Wren. Okay, so late modern and contemporary. Scottish Enlightenment for innovations in science and engineering. British overseas trade. British Empire began. So after World War II, the British Empire experienced rapid decolonization. There was also a speeding up of technological innovations. Automobiles became the primary means of transport. Jet engine was created, leading to wider air travel. National Health Service was created in 1948. And all of that prompted the reform of local government in England in the mid-20th century. Okay. All right, so based on the history, I can see that there would be a large influence of Greek and Roman architecture and structures. So it has standing stone monuments like Stonehenge, which is the ones that everyone in America knows about. It also lists Devil's Arrows, Rudston Monolith, and Castlereagh. Those are not ones that I've ever heard about. So the first cities and towns were established due to the Romans. So we got like London, Bath, York. Then after 1066, the castles were created in England. Then we get English Gothic architecture, medieval cathedrals, Canterbury Cathedral, Westminster Abbey. And then in the 16th century, there was the Tudor style of architecture, English Baroque, Georgian. Goodness, there are a lot of different styles. Okay, Opha of Angel. legendary king of the Angles, challenged the king's champions to a duel to regain the honor of the Angles. And he killed both of his opponents. So then we also have Robin Hood, which is very well known here. I grew up watching the animated version with the fox. That was my favorite. Arthurian legends, I'm very familiar with those. I really loved King Arthur and all of those stories growing up. Food is one of my favorite parts of culture at all. I love food. My husband, he's half Mexican, and his mom has taught me so many different recipes that she makes. And she didn't just learn from her parents who were from Mexico, she also learned from a lot of the Amish ladies that live around where she does. And so I ended up getting this really interesting mix of cultural recipes because of those two cultures combining into the food that she knows how to make. I have never heard of half of these cheeses. Chicken tikka masala is actually something that my brother-in-law makes. He's an excellent cook. I watched the Great British Bake Off for one of the seasons. It was so funny hearing them talk about American pies in such a negative light because people in the United States, like, we love our pie. Wow. The roads are so squiggly. And it's in more of a like circle shape. That's so weird. So in the United States, especially around where I live, which is dominated by a lot of farming, everything is broken up into a grid, and it's really hard to get lost here because everything is like broken down into just a very straight grid, and it's numbered, and this looks like it would be super easy to get lost. That took a much darker turn than I was expecting. Going through the different aspects of poverty in England was not what I was anticipating doing today, and even talking about some of my own experiences and going through just politics and all of that kind of stuff. It's not usually something that I enjoy doing. But when you're looking into the culture and history of an area, it is something that you will get into quite a bit. So I definitely understand that it ended up going there. What I found most interesting about the history of England is how it was so largely affected by all of the different countries around it, and even countries that were so far away that I wouldn't have expected them to really encounter each other all that much. And then it had this profound effect on the culture, the food that was produced there, and the language and everything that happened as it grew and developed and became unified and expanded beyond its borders and then contracted back in. And so it just has a very rich history that I really wish I had learned more about it when I was going through school. What did you find most interesting about the culture history of England? Tell me about it in the comments. And while you're commenting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you'll know when the next video comes out. If you'd like to support my work, you can find my books on Amazon.com. You can follow me on Twitter, or even consider donating to the CC Writes Patreon page. There are links in the description. And as always, thank you so much for joining me today on my writing adventures in imaginary places. I'll see you later.